Okay, I'm gonna retweet it
Okay.
on my twit. Is that what they're calling it? The twit?
Something like that, that's for sure. But we have started now. Hi, everyone. If there is anyone, I don't know. I always feel weird if I should wait for people or just assume people will join in and then rewatch it from the beginning. Uh, because it's always weird joining it live afterwards. But hi, everyone. I'm Josh from Josh's Bookish Voyage. This is Bree from the Luck Petition. I wasn't sure if you want to introduce yourself. Pretty much talk
No,
over
it's
you.
okay.
Uh,
This is
this,
Bree.
yeah. I was doing a video with Erica, um, and she forgot the name of her channel when we were introducing ourselves. It was funny.
I've been
Uh,
there. I've been there. Let me tell you. I've been there. Just totally spaced out on the name of my
yes.
channel.
So we are here today. We're gathered here today. Let me see how many people we have. I can't tell. uh,
Not we've gathered here today.
okay, we're here to talk about Hattie McDaniel, Black Ambition, and White Hollywood by Jill Watts. This is a nonfiction book written in 2005 by the
Yes.
author. She is a historian, and this book follows the life and a little bit before her life, a little bit after, of Hattie McDaniel. She is or was a star in Hollywood, one of the first black person, black woman to win. Was it an Oscar, if I remember correctly?
Academy
Academy.
Award.
My bad. Yes, Academy Award, and that was for Gone with the Wind. And
Yes.
this book, I think, works as two things. To generalize it, is it's a story of her life, but it is
Yes.
also the story of uh, being black in Hollywood. From, I guess, I think the Civil War on, I think is a good way of describing it. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess to get right into it, I guess before we start talking about the book, I guess let's just tell people I really like the book. I did. I'm pretty sure you did too, right?
I did.
Yep.
I did like the
Yep.
book. I enjoyed it.
So
I
if
was
there's any,
frustrated so many
yeah,
times, but I enjoyed it. And I
was that?
enjoyed that
I'm
Bonnie
sorry.
Turpin read it. She was the narrator. I enjoyed that.
Yes. Would you say you were frustrated with the content itself or with the writing, or a bit of
I
both?
was frustrated with the content, not the writing at
Yeah.
all. I thought the writing was very easily to
Mm-hmm.
follow, and it was very succinct. Even though it's not a short book, but it
Mm.
felt like it was like these are the facts. Like this is what happened.
Yeah.
I found a lot of quotable moments. I love that the writer spent time and got actual quotes from Hattie to supplement the facts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I was just mainly frustrated on certain parts of the book and how she interacted with certain change makers in Hollywood or in the
Mm-hmm.
film industry. That was really frustrated to me. And then, how she was treated and
Yeah.
assumptions that was made of her was really frustrating.
And as we've said already, privately at least, we're going to discuss those as we move on. Those moments in her life. I agree. I thought it was a really good book, and I really like. I read Jill Watts's book last year, The Black Cabinet, and I think she is a really good historian, a really good history writer, because of the way she crafts the narrative and how accessible it is, while not
Yeah.
uh, while, while not necessarily being light. Like it's intentionally meant to educate and help you get a deep understanding of what's going on, and it's done so well. And I big fan of Joe Watts and of this book.
Yeah.
So that's me trying to advocate to people that this is worth reading. It's really good, and if you're interested in hearing more, then of course stick around. Uh,
Yes.
so, for starters, the book starts out right, looking not at Hattie McDaniel's childhood or her life, but at the life of her parents. And uh, basically, she is the. I don't know. Do you want to lead this, or do you want me to? Because I know I feel like I'm just
I
repeating what
oh
you're
I
saying.
can. I
Go
can.
for it. Yep.
Hattie McDaniels, it's like Josh said, it started off with talking about her parents. And I also want to point out that it's really important in like Black and Indigenous communities to like talk about where you've come from and who you've come from. So I really liked how that was organized in the actual structure of the text. So it starts off with you learning about Henry and Susan McDaniel, who is Hattie McDaniel's parents. And it talks about the adversities that they experienced. So her father, the life of her father was really highlighted in that section. And her father, Henry, was in, I think, the Civil War, correct?
Yes.
I think was in the Civil War, and he got injured. So when he was discharged, he was injured. When he was discharged, he went home, to his family to help the family financially and supportively. And while he was trying to help his family, he had to deal with a lot of racism and like different things that were set in place that was totally against him. Um, Specifically, things that target his race and his financial stature at the time. So, for example, because he was injured and he was hurt during the war, right?
Hmm.
The US took 18 years to give him like veterans pay. And they were supposed to give him a $10 and they gave him $6 instead because they said that he couldn't prove that he was hurt while in active duty, which I thought was complete bullshit.
Hmm.
And while he was trying to get this $6 to support his family, they kept moving the finish line. They would be like, oh, turn in these papers, do these things. He would do those things. They would move the finish line. They would be like, oh, we don't really believe this doctor who said that you were injured. You need another doctor. And seeing doctors, getting doctors to do specific evaluations were expensive. So a lot of times he didn't even have the money to afford it. They grew up in poverty. They barely had food on the table, and you're asking this man to do all these different things. So that was very difficult to hear. And the fact that it took 18 years for the US to say, hey, oh, we'll give you the $6, but it's after they lost his paperwork, they denied his paperwork. It was just adversity after adversity, and all Henry wanted to do was to just take care of his family.
Hmm.
And the book talks about that. It talks about the birth of each child that Susan and Henry came. And actually, Hattie was the youngest of all. I think it's like 11 plus siblings. So you
Hmm.
go through the early life and also the life of her parents, which I thought was really, I thought it was done really well in the beginning of the book.
Hmm.
And I apologize for all my ums.
That was a great explanation. I think one thing that was really telling about the narrative of her father's life was how we saw every little thing building on top of every other thing, and how by the time he was older, because of the lack of treatment he was given, his problems had exponentially grown, and he was basically unable to work, which then meant he didn't have enough money to prove or the money he needed to meet the standards. Like they kept, like you said, they moving the standards, and it just got worse and worse because of lack of treatment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just felt like he, as much as this country values veterans and what they do, they definitely dropped the ball on
Hmm.
Henry McDaniel.
Yeah.
So that was really sad.
Hmm. And do you think that what the U.S. did there was rooted in racism or rooted in the lack of respect for veterans, or a bit of both? Or do you think
I
it's
think it
fair to
was,
say?
I think overwhelmingly rooted in racism.
Hmm.
Because in the US, the way we have documentation set up that you have to check if you're black, white,
Yeah.
Asian, whatever. So I'm sure they saw Negro because at that time Negro
Hmm.
was on census and on documents. So I'm sure they saw that and was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for
And
me, I'm standing behind the racism on that.
yeah. Well, plus just the general requirements being uh, inherently harder for him from his position as an ex-slave uh, to be able to meet those obligations. Like when he was finally old enough to get not just the payment from being in the war, but as I forget what it's called. Was it not Social Security, but it felt like it's something equivalent to that. As someone who's a certain
Yeah,
age, you get that, and he couldn't get that because he couldn't prove his age because he didn't have birth documents, and these sort of
exactly,
obligations that
because
were in
he was
place.
born into slavery.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Which
it.
which I thought was like even more upsetting because it's like
Mm,
you guys say you freed the slaves, right? That's what you said you did. And then you're like, okay, as a freed person, you're allowed to these things. But in order to get these things, you need a birth certificate. But I can't give you a birth certificate because
mhm,
we know why, right? We don't need to go into details, but it's like, so now you're requiring that um people who were slaves to provide a documentation that their previous wife slave owners or masters can't give to them.
mhm,
Like that documentation is nowhere, it's lost. You guys specifically lost those documents or they were burned. There were so many different things that happened to those documents. So it's like, how
yeah,
do you expect someone to engage in the free activities when you're not giving them an opportunity to succeed in those areas?
mhm, yeah,
Sorry.
yep. And I think a lot of this obviously was, like you said, it sort of told the story or gave a precursor to the story of Hattie and what her childhood was like, because her childhood and the poverty she had to live with, I think, was very apparent in how she lived her life until the day she died, even at the peak of her time in Hollywood. Um, that would be a recurring theme, right?
Yeah.
So, what would you say about her childhood stood out most to you? Um, if anything in
I,
particular.
yeah, so I thought it was really interesting that she was kind of the, what is it, erudite?
I
It's like the, is that the word? Like
I don't
a
know
very
what does that mean.
studious person, like
Yeah.
a very studious person. So I feel like she was really smart and dedicated to education as a kid, and it
Hmm.
was well documented how smart she was. And I think having her brother Otis was like, I think he really like sparked that entertainer in her,
Hmm.
because the parents had so many kids and was trying to figure so many things out, and Otis was like, "Oh no, Hattie, like you want to kind of figure out your art, your craft," and really helped her mold what she wanted to be, and then she started
Hmm.
to get that little taste into performing and what that looks like, and she just started figuring out like what bits work good for her, like what styles work good for her. And
Hmm.
um I also thought it was really interesting in that part of the book when we learned about her childhood is when she started to like think of herself as a comedian, and then I felt embarrassed as a black person who didn't know. I thought comedians was like black comedians. I'm just gonna say black comedians was more of a thing that probably started in like the 60s or 70s.
Hmm.
I thought that is when we started to have black comedians, or when we were first able to learn about them, or they were able to, engage in their craft publicly. So when I realized that Hattie herself, um, was a comedian, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. So I thought that was
So
interesting.
so you didn't I guess I didn't know, but you didn't realize that she was known largely as a comedian or for her comedy, at least.
Yep. I actually didn't know much about her at all.
Yeah. Neither
Um,
did I.
didn't even know she existed. And that's terrible. That,
Mhm.
that's a whole nother conversation about access and education here in the US. But
Yeah.
um I think I didn't know who she was, and I was like, "Oh, actress. Okay, okay." And then I started to learn, okay, but comedian, like that is what she
Hmm.
identified with the most. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know anything about this."
Yeah.
Like
I thought it
not
was interesting
anything.
how Watts basically talked about her childhood and how she basically like made it seem as though she had the acting or the ability to put on a show early on, right? And always sort of knew how to to put on the face that needed to be put on for a situation, which was interesting. What did you think about her decision to drop out of school and to pursue what do you call it? The thing she does,
Oh,
acting or entertainment. Entertainment is the word I'm looking for.
entertainment.
Yeah.
To me, I thought it was commendable. I'm like, go ahead, like chase your dreams. And I also thought, man, how powerful and how driven it had to be black in that time,
Hmm.
and being like, I'm gonna pursue this white ambition, like
Yeah.
so it's like I'm gonna go and do it. So I thought that was really admirable that she did that. My nephew didn't drop out of school, but he just finished high school and was like, I'm gonna act, and he's actually acting now. And
Hmm.
I was very proud of him then, here in 20, I think it was 2018 or 19 or something, he made that decision. So
Hmm. Did he go straight to Hollywood, or is he taking the path of
no,
Hattie
he
of starting small?
starting small a little bit.
Hmm.
He just got offered a pretty big role. I can't talk about it, but
Yeah.
he's doing things. I'm very proud of him.
Hmm. Well, that's great. That's great. Glad for him.
Hmm.
Um, so when we start to think about Hattie and her life, we see her at the very different stages, right? I think she is her. What I'm trying to say, like the type of person I think she's seen as, even though gets more popular with age, she I think she has a very different identity at these different stages in her life. Starting out, she's a comedian, of course, but within that comedy, Watts tries to highlight how there's always an underlying message she's trying to convey to the Black community, and basically to fight back against uh, the system of oppression that was in place, right? And
Yes.
that seemed to be a ongoing just rather highlight the central piece of what she was doing was for that purpose. And I guess it's that purpose, that highlighting of that decision, of that intent behind her work to try and do her part to tackle or target or fight against the oppression of Black people for her community was very much present. And I say that because of how it feels like it sort of slowly got sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like she didn't get rid of it, but it was slowly peeled away. Like she lost control of what she was able to do, and um, it's kind of sad how she gets the success she wants, but in the process, she sort of loses I think the reason she did it in the first place, or part of the reason she
Yeah.
did it.
I definitely like the way you said lost control, and then I wanted to go back to like um the things that she did to be a proponent and advocate for better treatment in the Black community, or Black communities, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one is there was one of the guys who signed her who realized that she was starting to get popular. I forget his name. Was it Wes? Hold on, let me go.
Oh,
I took
I
notes
don't.
on this.
I can't do names.
No, it's all right. I took notes because I can't do names either. But I was ready to fight him. Talking
I know.
about
There's like
fight
one name I
him.
remember, and that's the NCAA.
Yeah, CP,
Walter White.
or you're right. Walter White. Is that him?
Well, no,
Hold
that's the
on. Give
guy.
me a
That's the
second.
name of someone later in her life. That's the only name I remember.
Hold on. I'm gonna get there. There was
Well, let's see.
okay, I'll just like describe it. So there is a guy who became
Mhm,
like her agent, and he literally pretty much said that he created her and created
mhm,
her mannerisms and how she did things. He would accept jobs on her behalf, and that she couldn't be as loud as she usually is. She couldn't do like the things that make her
mhm.
Hattie when she's on the stage. And
Yeah.
he would tell her, like, she can't do this, she can't do that. So she was in a contract with him for many years and was stifled from doing a lot of things that made her herself, which I was like, typical white man at that time,
Yeah.
like stripping her of her power. and the things that she wanted to do and stifling her, and then having the audacity that he now owns the gimmicks that she does. I'm like,
Yeah.
how do you? It just was very much giving us slavery, but also it wasn't too many degrees removed at that time. So
Yeah.
also, like, I get how this white man was thinking that, even though I also believe that it was wrong. And then going back to when you were talking about, like, what she did for the Black community, I want to talk briefly. In the book, we learn about the community that she lived in called West Adams, and how they were pretty much trying to kick out all the Black residents. And Hattie was like, hell no, that's
Hmm.
not, she was not about that. And she actually worked with like the board, or the like neighborhood board or something like that, to kind of get things changed and get things for the better for Black people. And it just kept reminding me about The Color of Law. It's another nonfiction book that talks about, gerrymandering, zoning,
Hmm.
all these things, and like what happened during Roosevelt time, and how things was like specifically put in place to disenfranchise folks, right? So, wanted just to read a little thing that I copied from that book.
Hmm.
And it
Okay.
said, in 1926, during the time that Hattie was alive and well, in 1926, exclusionary zoning embraced covenants. All neighborhoods should have appropriate restrictions, racial exclusion clauses. This was started by President Hoover, and the Bartholomew Report aided in this atrocity. So pretty much, President Hoover was like the president who really started all of these zonings and shit.
Hmm.
And he said, "Hey, I'm gonna get this guy named Bartholomew. I forget what he was, but he was high ranking of some sort. He had a lot of power." And this guy pretty much created all these different things, that very much excluded people of color, specifically Black people, from moving into different places, for owning property, for all different type of things. There was even a part in the book, Hattie McDaniel, where these white folks was like, no, it is by law that Black people must give up their property. They must give
Hmm.
up their property
Yeah.
to white folks. And I'm just like, wow, this is color of law 101.
Hmm.
And although I don't have enough time to go into detail line by line, um, it just reminded me of those different things that was said and explained in The Color of Law.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as the author here, Drew Watts, is saying, like it
Yes.
also, I think it's a principal indication of this, of the fact that she is clearly driven, right, to fight this type of oppression that is in place, to use her power, and when she feels as if, but I guess the question here is, she recognizes she has the power to fight it. So, at what point did it become too much to lose, or is that an oversimplification?
Yeah, I would say it's an oversimplification, because I think, based on like the quotes that was used in the book, I don't think she really gave a shit about moving the way that she was moving. I think for her, it was just second nature for her to fight for Black folks and be on their side. The thing that I felt, was very disheartening, was that there were Black folks publicly, loudly saying what she's not doing
Hmm.
for different Black communities, without, like, a lot of times Hattie McDaniel, from what I understood from the text, was not screaming on the top of the Empire State Building, like, look at all this stuff that I'm doing for us Negroes. Like, she was not saying any of those things. She was just helping whenever she can. She also was a part of, what is it? Delta Sigma Rho or something, which is like part of the Divine Nine, and they have a huge history of philanthropy for specifically the Black community. So to accuse her of not using her power and her privilege to help the Black community, I felt was unjust. Maybe she wasn't helping the Black community in ways in which people thought that she should, but
Hmm.
the way I was reading the book and the way that I understand, like I said, Delta Sigma Rho, I think was the name of the sorority. and the way that I understand the things that she did, that even like on her deathbed when she was writing her will and she was like, I'm going to give this person my pots and things
Yeah.
like that. And even in the book, the author says like she understood because she came from poverty. So she understood the kindness of giving someone or leaving someone her pots. So for me, I felt like she was very reflective. And I also understood the criticism. It's like, why are you shucking and jiving for the white man? But it's like someone had to be first. And
Hmm.
Hattie knew that. She understood the complexity of being first and what that would entail. So it's
Yeah.
like, if it wasn't for Hattie, we wouldn't have Will Smith. If it wasn't for Hattie, we wouldn't have Jamie Foxx. If it wasn't for Hattie, we wouldn't have Kevin Hart, for God's sake.
Hmm.
So it's like somebody had to do that work. And the fact that
Yeah.
she was getting hate from both sides, I was like, man, I was disappointed.
There's a point later in the book, and I didn't save it or quote or anything, but I had to listen to it 3 or 4 times because the wording that Watts uses is essentially there's a point where people want Hattie to take a stand against the producers of one of the films she's doing, and ultimately she doesn't do it. And the way she worded it, Watts is made it sound as if that she basically chose to do nothing. And it was that choice of words that took me aback because I wasn't expecting her to go in that direction. And I guess that's sort of why I wonder. Like, I'm sure she didn't do. She did something, and I guess the question is it enough? And we also, I guess, don't really know how much she pushed back behind closed doors. Like, how much of it has not been
Exactly.
documented is the question.
Exactly.
I,
Exactly. And I found myself lending my own experiences on Hattie. And when I say that, I felt like it was biased, but I also felt like it was it was valid. So like I exist as a black woman. I know what that
mhm,
feels like. I know how the world sees me. I know how people interact with me as a black woman. So knowing that, I can imagine having all those different adversities on top of what I already experienced being Black in
yeah,
2021. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about this list that I made of
sure.
like all the adversities that she has. And I'll
Hmm.
read that at the little end, but just reminding myself by saying that.
Hmm.
And having all those things, you can't be out here as a black woman myself fighting every goddamn battle. Do you know how exhausting
Yeah.
that is? So
Hmm.
sometimes you just got to be like, you know what? I'm gonna let God handle that.
Yeah.
Or I don't have the energy. I don't like, and the thing is that Hattie, every second, she was dealing with depression and
Hmm.
consistent loss. Like she was losing siblings and family members like toots. Do you hear me? Like
Yeah.
I felt like every year or every couple months, someone close to her died. Like imagine. Like
Hmm.
that's just a lot. So like she's not only is she dealing with being the first of many things in the film industry. She's dealing with poverty. She's dealing with being black. She's dealing with being with sexism, being a widow, being fat in a fat phobic society, acting, being casted and seen as granny or the mammy or the mama or the maid, shucking and jiving for the white folks, racism, colorism. She's been accused of tomfoolery, which is Uncle Tom, constant
Hmm.
criticism, constant loss of parents and siblings, miscarriage, hunger, depression. Larry Williams, punk ass, who took all of her shit and just was a gold digger, white cishet men who claimed to be her manager and silence her voice, the KKK burning a cross on her lawn. Like, imagine all of that. And then
Hmm.
people are like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? It's like, you don't know what her capacity was that day. You don't know how she was feeling that day.
Hmm.
There's only so much you can take, for God's
Yeah.
sake.
And really, when you list it all back to back to back, I think it really highlights how much of a survivor she is and and how heroic she really was, right? Be able to push through all of that and do what she was able to do. Now, I do think this is a good point to talk about something wanted to hope to fit into the conversation at some point, which I mentioned to you was basically talk about Hattie as she compares to other figures in history and modern figures. The first that came to mind for me was oh shoot, what was her name? And Jill Watts's other book, Black Cabinet, um, Mary Bethune. It's a very different figure, but um, Mary Bethune was the head of the Black Cabinet. She's the one who helped it together and helped
Yeah.
push for change. And this is the group that came right before the civil rights movement that we they all know very well, and is I think the book really does a good job of highlighting how much work they did to I think set up what would come. But in her final years, in the final years of the Black Cabinet, that is, that it started to degrade in both its cohesiveness and its power, largely because the
Mm.
Black community lost faith in them because they were getting older. They began to be seen as a part of the elite, part of the infrastructure, and it's this unwillingness, I guess, to see to recognize what someone is doing and to feel as if they are now the enemy. And I just think that's that kind of perspective is something that seems to be common. I think a better comparison to Hattie, honestly, for me, or it seemed to me at least, would be if we look at Vice President Kamala Harris, who was a attorney general, who has been accused of just being another cop, of being a sympathizer, of not doing enough in her attorney general position. And the question here then is, what was she doing? Was it enough? And was she not? It's basically been accused of the same things, I think, similar things um, as Hattie was, right? Of not of basically just being a part of the problem, a different type part of the problem because she was in the position of power, but still she wasn't using her position of power to push back as much as she could have. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if you have any. Uh,
Yeah, I think I think people do not give Black women enough credit to be a human being. And
mhm,
I think a lot of times, um, especially from the American standpoint, that non-Black folks look at Black women as if we or they are fucking heroes. Like they just out here need to tackle every problem at every point at every time. And if they're not tackling these problems in the way in which that the masses want them to, then they are being accused of Uncle Tomness and tomfoolery, which is like one of the ultimate insults to a Black woman. Because if we look at history, it's really Black women out here doing shit, being the
mhm,
first, the trailblazers, opening doors, and being very supportive. So the fact that we often get labeled as not doing enough and not doing this and not doing that, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about capacity. Like, there are times where, like, just the other day, I walked into my office and I had my hair the way it is. My hair is usually straight. I don't know, Josh, if you really remember, but I usually have my straight locks, but these are curly locks, right? It's different.
mhm.
So my white coworker saw my locks and she was like, um, "Oh my God, I love your hair. Can I touch it?" And I was like, no, you can't. And this is in 2021, right? People are still
Mhm.
saying dumb shit. So it's like, I was like, no, you can't. And like a part of me wanted to educate her and be like, oh my God, this is why you can't. And like really get on this, education moment. But one, it's not my job to educate you, white woman. And then also two, I didn't have the energy for it. One, I had four other clients that I had to see that day. And
Mhm.
I just didn't have energy to lend to her my own shit that I have to deal with, meaning coming into a job that's predominantly white. Everybody's white, but me, I'm the only Black counselor. I'm literally the first Black counselor in the history of my school. So that's a whole different thing. So it's like, I don't always have the energy to go toe to toe with white folks. So to assume that Hattie or to assume that Kamala has the energy to constantly be on and do all these different things, it's it's unfair. And it's also like they are a human being. They cannot
Mhm.
do all of these things. Like that is physically impossible.
So, a question or a difference, I guess I would posit just to hear your thoughts is that they have not well they both Hattie McDaniel and Vice President Kamala Harris both accepted positions of power, right? They took on those positions, and with great power comes great responsibility. I guess the question then is, how much more responsibility they have with once they accept that position of power. Is it their responsibility to completely change the system, or should we trust them to be doing enough? I guess at which point. Sorry, is that me?
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all. What I was trying to say is that I, at what point is it? Do we need to just give them free? Do we need to just? What I'm trying to say is basically trust them.
I remember someone saying that it was quite loud.
Sorry,
It's okay.
I had that queued up. Um, where was I? Damn it! Sorry, y'all.
No, I
Shoot.
get what you're saying. I'm
Yeah.
just going to answer what I think you're saying. So,
Mhm.
this is the thing. Just because I am a black woman and they are black women, Kamala and Hattie are black women. Were, sorry, I'm like trying to say that with both of them. Both of them identify as black. Doesn't mean that they are not without criticism. That's not what I'm
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that when it comes to being a black woman, there is a level of criticism that gets put on them that is not
Mhm.
afforded to any other
Yeah.
person, any other
Absolutely.
non-black woman person. So I
Mhm.
feel that people put this superwoman shit on them and they are quick to vilify them and uh, literally cut them down for the actions that they
Yeah.
take and the actions that they don't take. When I think that we need to realize that black women are human beings like every
Yeah.
goddamn person.
Mhm. Beautifully said. Very beautifully said. Let's see. We have an extra comment here. Jill Watt says, for Hattie McDaniel's dilemma, place blame for the weakness in her career on white Hollywood for perpetuating racist stereotypes in white society for hanging on to racialist or racist ideology.
Which is true because, like, if they didn't hold on to those racist ideologies, then she
Mhm.
wouldn't have consistently being cast as the mammy, as the maid, and
Yeah.
shucking and goddamn jiving.
Mhm. Because something
But
that's very apparent. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh no, go ahead. But I just felt
Uh,
like,
yeah.
but Hattie really wanted to be an actress. She really wanted to be a comedian. So there was no other blueprint to operate in.
Mhm.
Like she literally
Yeah.
had to work with what she had. Like she didn't have any
Yeah.
other. Like she couldn't be star as that white lady in Breakfast in Tiffany. That was never
Yeah.
gonna happen. And she was fat. They
Mhm.
weren't gonna let her do that. She wasn't conventionally
Yeah.
beautiful to them.
I think something else that is worth remembering, or that is highlighted a lot in the book, is that even when she ultimately accepts these positions, these roles that have so much baggage along with them, that are so harmful, it's not as if she isn't actively trying to push back. It is apparent that every time she tries to push back in her own little ways, and every time, or almost every time, she was like they're pushing back on her. So in that sense, like it's not as
Yes.
if she's not doing anything. She only has so much power, and she is actively trying. She doesn't just want a job. She is still trying to do something with it. And I guess the problem is people don't think it's enough. Well, they didn't think it
Yeah,
was
and I'm
enough.
just like, I'm like, man, this girl parents is literally ex slaves. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is during the civil rights movement. This is during, I mean, the Civil War. Sorry, this is during the Civil War, and this is during the Great Depression. And
Mm-hmm.
she what like? But I also
Yeah.
think it's also important to, point out, like I was saying earlier, like there is a level of privilege that white women and black men don't understand. White women because they are white and they have that privilege, and black men because they are male and understand and they have that male privilege. Versus black women don't have access to any of those things. And you would think that there would be more like sympathy from both of those groups and understanding, the intersectional identities that comes with being a black woman, but that is not there. Even at the time while reading the book, I saw something be explained as in it's like Negro sympathizers, and I was like, what? That was actually something that was thought like in that time, and like her having to deal with all those different things, and also try to like break through in Hollywood. The
Mm-hmm.
difficulty, like that was
Yeah.
just difficult.
Yeah. So, I guess if we continue talking about or thinking about her life, um, So we talked about, well, you talked about her time. I think she was doing a lot of, what kind of shows was she doing? Were they like plays, or I wasn't entirely clear on the type of shows
Well,
she was doing.
she did some plays. I can't remember the trajectory or the timeline, but she did some plays. She did a radio show. Like she did a
That was her in
couple
life.
different
Yeah,
things.
I
Yeah.
think it was either right before Gone with the Wind or right after that she did. I think it was after Gone with the Wind because she had changed, I think, from WB, and she was doing those skits, like 5 or 6 minute skits that she put
Hmm.
together. But okay, let's think about after she first started working with her first agent. I think she started doing movies right in Hollywood
Yeah.
before Gone with the Wind. Um, and this is as we see her start to grow. I mean, as she gets to bigger positions, she gets less power, and her influence lessens as well. Until ultimately, it all. Stop me if there's anything in particular in this time period you want to talk about, but it ultimately culminates right with Gone with the Wind, the both the perfect and worst possible uh, role that she could get, right? This amazing position, this amazing role in such a massive film. Um, it is the best that she could. It is one of the best things she could hope for in Hollywood, right? While simultaneously being forced to propagate the very racist messaging of Gone with the Wind, which I saw my dad was watching. Maybe he's still watching. I don't think he should have a hard time understanding. He might push back. The point is that Gone with the Wind, very racist, the book and the movie, and
Exactly.
I can't hear you very well. Is that
I'm
me?
saying exactly. Is that me? Can you hear me
I,
now?
yes, but it's very low.
Oh.
Hold on, let me just check. When you go to your audio settings, is there an audio setting? I don't know. Shoot. Can somebody comment if you can hear us both very well? Because maybe it's just on my end.
Because my headphones died. So then
Oh,
Can you hear me
so
now?
going. Oh, yes, I can hear you now. I can hear you now. Perfect.
Okay.
And I could hear you before. It was just super low.
Okay.
Um, what were we saying? What was I saying? Oh,
You were
yeah. So you
talking
got this
about
position.
going in the wind,
Oh, yeah.
being racist.
And to be fair, like the people who push back on her taking the role, the book is very racist and it has survived. It is 2021. I grew up in the 1990s, or 1990, but it was a book that it was a movie or book I never read or watched, but it was something I was familiar with because I had family members who had watched it, family members who had read the book, right? And it was something that was just normalized. And I still have family members that I've spoken to in the last few years who see nothing wrong with Gone with the Wind and who think it's perfectly fine when it is the perfect example of this casual rewriting of history and normalizing of racist history. And the damage of
Mm-hmm.
it is very clear. To be fair, it has been very damaging, and it continues to be because it's so easily accepted. Not it's not. I think they talk two dimensions in the book. It's not like the book. I know what was the KKK movie, the one that I forget
Oh,
the
I know exactly what you're talking about. A born something about. Oh my
yeah.
God. Hold on. Hold
Basically,
on.
this yeah. It's a
Oh
movie.
my God. I wrote it down. It was during this time too.
Yeah,
She had to deal with it because that's when the KK
yeah.
resurgent came on in.
I think she talked about
Um.
it in the Black Cabinet as well, but it was the book, the
Oh my
movie, I
God.
mean,
What's the
that
name of the book?
was used as propagation or
Birth of a
Birth of a
Nation.
Nation.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Yes, Birth of a Nation.
I
Right.
was like
It was
something
this.
born, right?
Yeah, it was a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
propaganda film to support the KKK and their rhetoric, but as Jill Watts describes in the book, at least the Birth of the Nation was so blatant in its lies and misconception. Gone with the Wind, on the other hand, was much more subtle, and is why Gone with the Wind is still beloved today, while Birth of the Nation is such an obviously horrific movie. Um,
And I'm
so
like, why is it beloved? And who's it beloved by?
the South, people who want to believe the South, the white people in the South
I'm
who want to believe it.
I am still pissed, Josh, about those Atlanta assholes and what they did to Hattie. Like, really?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Really?
I'm ashamed to be from the state and to have lived in Atlanta. It's great to see how much Atlanta has changed, um, relative to the rest of the state. But
Oh
yeah,
my
I
God.
and
That was just sad.
it was just as disgusting how. So I guess we should say they had when the movie finally showed. They wanted to do the premiere of it in Atlanta, given the fact that it's all about Atlanta and Georgia and so on and so forth during the Civil War. And because of these Jim Crow laws during that time, 1930s or 40s, they said they could not bring the black stars could not be there, at least not front and center, and their pictures could not be shown front and center, despite the fact that Hattie McDaniel was, I'm pretty sure, universally acknowledged to be the best part of the film in her performance.
Exactly.
To convey it.
Exactly.
And when the mayor of Atlanta says she can't be here, you can't do this, the producers of the movie, they just take it in stride. They pretend like they're bothered, yet they do jack shit in response. And it's that mindset is still very present today when it comes to any oppressed group
Very.
and supposed allies who aren't willing to take action when they have the opportunity to. And
So let's supposedly allies. We love it. We love that word. Continue. The phrase. I guess it's words.
yeah, and it's just like it's still true when it comes to the Black community today, to the Indigenous community, to the queer community, the trans community, especially. How we want to say that we're allies, and then when it comes to something that we are supporting, whether we have a big amount of support or a small or a large platform to do that, if it hurts us, that's when we're not willing to give up. We're not willing to give it up. And
I feel like that's a whole nother thing. I just feel like you should be vocal for the people who you say that you engage in allyship with when they're not in the room as much as you do when they're in the room.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's just how I feel about it.
I agree.
Black Cabinet. I feel like I need to read that because I truly enjoyed how this was written.
This was probably my favorite nonfiction and probably my favorite book in general of last year. When I first read it,
of last year,
of last year. Sorry. I know when I read it, I really liked it, but it was after sitting on it for months that I realized how great it actually was, how it would not leave my mind, and just how interesting and how well written it is, and how new it was. It's just, and also the performance by damn it, what is wrong with me? by Bonnie Turpin is amazing.
Oh, Bonnie did that too?
Yeah, she did both. Yeah.
Stay less.
And
that's Jill as well, right?
Yep. This was. I think that's part of why they released this new book this year. So to be clear, the 2005 book got a new audio release this year, right? Like you said before, Bonnie Turpin.
Wow.
Right after finding this one, it is fantastic.
Jill, the fact that you're choosing my favorite narrator, listen, it's Bonnie Turpin, and then it's Robin Miles, and then it's like, I think her name is Jay, forget how you pronounce her first name, but Jay Abbott. Mm-hmm. They're all Black women. I'm here for all of them. Yeah. I'm here for all of them. We love it. Yeah. And by we, I really mean me, is what I'm saying.
Yes, awesome book. It's just as well. Yeah, just as well written. It's a bit thicker, but it's really easy to read. Easy as it is so far as like from an academic perspective, it's easy.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yes.
What do you think about Hattie's love life? Because I was ready to shoot the last guy. I'm sorry, I'm saying it. I was ready to take him out. And the first guy, I was like, oh, he's so nice. Why he have to leave her a widow at 21? That's sad.
That was hard to believe. I thought, I don't know, like in one sense, like it seemed as if she was, I don't know, like I'm trying to say in the film, she was given part of her caricature of a character or personification that she was given was this idea of being a non-sexual creature. And we see her try to push back against that, at least in some of her smaller shows. And it seems like in her real life, she was very much proudly a sexual creature, someone who also was very supportive of the queer community, it seemed. That was highlighted towards the end of the book as well.
That was.
I don't know. I'm curious because it does seem to conflict with a very Christian side, even going into Christian Science, which we'll touch on, I guess, towards the end. But I can't. I don't know. Like it. I guess it's good for her. I mean, I'm sad that she can't find someone. She find someone that would last. But I don't mean to overgeneralize, but it does seem like it's kind of part of the course in Hollywood, which I don't know if that's overgeneralizing for her, but that's my general
Yeah.
thoughts when it came to that.
Yeah.
I was really, like you said, the glass guy was particularly sad to see because he seemed just to be taking advantage of her completely. And
I think I was judging him right away because of his age. I was like,
yeah,
do we trust him?
yeah. You see, I was
Like that was like the biggest thing for me.
so he robbing the. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right thing to say. I guess I was thinking the other way around. Like, oh, she's going for a young guy. It's like good for her. That's the way I saw it. Like,
No, I thought, maybe she was like, I'll do this because he's good companionship. And
yeah,
then once they got married, things went south. Like it
hmm
didn't, at first she didn't really like him. And then
yeah,
she was like, oh, okay, I guess I liked him more than I thought. Then they got married and they just was bickering for 4 months. And I just felt like this. Why are you upset that she's making you sign a prenup of sorts? Because it's like, sir, this woman worked hard for every coin she has.
yeah,
If she wants to protect herself, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
But I know I people differ from that. People like, no, when you're married, it's us. And I'm like, but is it? And that's
That's
probably why I shouldn't
naive,
get
in my
married.
opinion. No, I just
Yeah,
think
and I
it's
feel like
naive.
maybe I should. No, straight up. I feel the same way. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't get married because I'm like, us. I don't bust my ass for this. And then you want to bring your raggedy ass in here talking about what you
hmm
own?
Not to go on a tangent, but people change, they evolve, and if you really love
Exactly.
someone, you should want to protect them, even from yourself down the line. Quite frankly.
Exactly. Exactly. That's our TED Talk.
So, I guess what were your thoughts? And did you have any other thoughts when it came to her? Actually, we didn't really tackle we talked about the effects of Gone with the Wind. We haven't talked about her decision to play in it. Like, what do you think about that, and whether or not, like, was that where she crossed the line? Has she ever crossed the line in taking a role that is problematic? Because to be fair, while as effective as she is, it is a very harmful movie. And do you think she has any responsibility in that?
I think that is a question, and not to like use this as a cop out. That is
Yeah,
only a question I think that she can
yeah,
grapple with while she
hmm
was still living on this earth. I felt like
yeah,
I just never know what I would have done given certain circumstances, given the time in which she lived in,
yeah,
given her family history, given what she was trying to do with her career. I don't know what I would have done. Especially, I can't remember if she took that role when she was like starving
yeah,
and like, barely was eating. People got to eat. But I also understand the flip side of like, why would you shuck and jive for these
yeah,
white folks? Like, why take this role? Why couldn't you just let a white person dress up as blackface, which was something
yeah,
that was done very popular in that time that I didn't even know.
yeah.
Maybe I just blocked out that whole time, and I was like, I'm not gonna like, I don't know nothing about these
Honest,
people.
I feel like if she had done that, the movie probably wouldn't have survived as well. It would have been harder to dismiss the concerns, right? Um, I think she clearly had some uh, what's the word I'm looking for? She clearly was trying to self-justify it with her approach to it, right? So consistently, whether or not it was enough, it's understandable how she wants to be able to have this job while also be able to justify that she can make a difference. And the fact that she got an Academy Award for it, I think does speak to something. She brought some life, some uniqueness, some personification. She brought some truth, some realness to the character, and I think that's what she was trying to do. Right, was trying to make to show that Black women are real people who with real emotions, and even if it didn't convey it as well as many people would like, and it still contributed to the overall problem of the movie. I think she was trying to make the most of a very bad situation, right?
I agree.
And so like you said, it's up to her to decide if it was enough, if it was justifiable. But it's
Yeah.
not as if.
And
Sorry.
who are us in our 2021 mentalities and privileges to judge her decisions at that time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who are we to do that?
Yeah. True.
Not to shut you up. I'm not saying
No,
like
no.
that. I was just saying, like, who am I with more privileges as a Black person than she ever had at that time to say that to her?
No, I think it sums it up fairly well, honestly. Visualize both. Yeah. So I guess, are there any other thoughts, I guess, about that? We can move on to the last stage of her life, post Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, we can move on to the last stage of her life. I think I went deep in what else I had to say. And then I just remembered the name of the person who hired her, her manager who was trash. His name was Selznick. Okay, I remembered it.
Yeah, I remember that now that you say that. Yeah, okay. Well, I think we had a good conversation there, so I think it was worth going into.
Yeah.
I think it's just the height of everything the book was covering was in that period. So now, as we leave Gone with the Wind, as much as you might think that, oh, this should be the making of her career, it instead seemed to be the destruction of her career, as her opportunities are dwindling and the expectation that she might finally get a character with some depth seems to have been not realistic, as she seems to be getting the same bad characters, except this time they're for smaller, less important projects. And she now has to deal with, I don't know if typecasting is the right way, because it's not quite typecasting, because it's
racist.
Yeah, it's a racist way in which every person every organization she's worked for has tried to create this image of her that is rooted in racism, this racist stereotype, and now they say she is not a good fit for these other roles that are finally starting to come about, partly because of her, because of her ability
and
to
a role
create
that
communication.
she was excited to play.
Yeah,
I forget what role that was, and I was just like, really?
Was that the first time that the role went to was it a TV show or a movie, and the role went to a light-skinned Black woman, which I thought was an interesting, interesting turn, because up to now we seem to be having light-skinned Black women, not getting many jobs.
Oh my God, that's something else I wanted to talk about. That is something else I wanted to talk about. But yes, continue
No, well, I was just going to say that, like, we have this sort of inverse of today, where because they were trying to push this idea of this caricature Black woman, this racist idea of her, they needed darker skinned women because of that. And as they finally start to get away from it, they feel like they have to get away from darker skinned women, as if to be darker skinned is to be a caricature. And we can see how it eventually evolved into what we have today, where light-skinned women or light-skinned Black women get more opportunities on television and otherwise. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, you summed it up. That was something I was thinking about, like, because I didn't even know there was a time at that time that black, darker skin, Black folks were preferred in those roles. And when that was mentioned, I was like, what? And then at the end, seeing that switch, because that's what I know. I know. I try to like talk to, because I have a sister who is lighter than me, and I like try to talk to her about that, because she's a light-skinned Black woman, and talk about like the privileges that she hold that I don't, and then talking about those different things. And I was like, wow, yep. It's like one of those things you shake your head to, and you're like, yep,
Yeah. So that it's just interesting to see how the industry has evolved, right? And yeah. So I guess this is her career. Like, I don't want to say that her career led to her inevitable slow decay in quality of life and death, but obviously it had to have influenced her mental health, her physical health as a side effect of her mental health, and how that eventually led to her, I guess, just seeming the impression I got to be less and less happy and getting in worse and worse opportunities until eventually she eventually passed away
Yeah.
due to a number of complications. Although I guess we do see her get, this is after Gone with the Wind. I think is when we see her begin to do the skits where she's given the opportunity to do her own show. And am I wrong? That was after Gone with the Wind, because like it's where it's like it seems like the last
After
time
Going
she's
with the Wind, I think she had her own show. I
yeah.
think you're
So
right.
she had these skits that she was doing, and her producer or whatever, her manager was trying to stop her from being so sexual, from being so, I guess, direct in her calling out of shit white people do and say.
No, straight up.
And they called her out. They tried to stop her, and the impression I got is she just didn't stop. She said okay and kept doing it, and that
Yeah.
seemed to be the last time that she really got to push back on the infrastructure. After that,
Yeah,
she got
stick it to the man.
she got
I also,
jobs. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I also wanted to point out, like, even today in the medical field, Black women aren't listened to. There has been countless of documents and facts that shows that, doctors tend to not listen to Black women and the pain that we experience. And the fact that they're like, oh, the doctors didn't know it was cancer. It's like, was we really checking out the quality of care? And a part of me wanted to also point out, like, the anti-Blackness that Hattie herself had in those
Yeah.
instances when she was like, oh, I only want a white doctor. Like, she specifically said, like, she wanted these white doctors. And to me, that's also some anti-Blackness, but it's also like, I get it if you think like white people are more knowledgeable, because that was the rhetoric and the narrative that was used then and also used now. But however, historically, there has been things to show that the medical field, and also a lot of white people who work in the medical field, non-Black people, are just not listening to our pain. So I'm like, maybe if you had the Black doctor, they would have been able to be like, okay, this was cancer, but I can only speculate that. But I was in that moment, I was like, man, I don't like that you're engaging in this anti-Blackness, but I understand why you were engaging in that
Yeah.
anti-Blackness.
Now, when you talk about her calling for her white doctor, are you talking about after her stroke when she asked for her white doctor, or was there a time
Yeah,
before that I'm forgetting? Because I know
it was that time.
I know Watts specifically said that it could be like you said, her own prejudice shining through, or was it that she just wanted her personal doctor for whatever situation she was in? That doesn't
Yeah,
obviously discount
I
your whole
remember it.
conversation.
I remember. What'd you say? Sorry.
Now, so that doesn't discount everything you just said. Just that there is the possibility that maybe she just wanted her own personal doctor who happened to be white.
Yeah, I just felt like around that time, and I wish I had the correct quote of her, like, specifically being like, I want this white doctor.
Yeah, that's fair.
And to me, I felt like it was the whiteness that she wanted in the doctor. So for me, I went directly to, okay, that's some anti-Blackness there.
Yeah.
And then I was like, to me, as a, like, 2021, being like, we really can't trust them because they ain't trusting our pain.
Yeah.
And that not trusting our pain could have led to the quality of life that you were feeling. And again, I'm speculating.
So I guess this is a good time. I was talking about her anti-blackness and how that may have fed into her own lack of proper care. We can also talk about her Christian Science, right, and whether or not she would even have gotten treatment if if it was pointed out, right? And do you
Right.
have any particular thoughts on that? Or it's okay if you don't have much to say.
I don't. Say more. Say more. I'm just asking for
I
your question.
suppose I thought of it like when I hear someone who denies care because of some ideological belief, my first thought is of, like, say, Steve Jobs, who died of a very preventable form of prostate cancer, because he wanted to try a naturalistic diet approach first, and it ultimately led to it being too late when he realized it wasn't treatable. And it's just so sad to see people who get caught up in these basically anti-science way of thinking in a way that just hurts themselves and the people around them sometimes. I mean, this is still very much true when it comes to anti-vaxxers right now in COVID. And
No, straight up.
it's a dangerous way of thinking that it's just one of many ways in which I guess where we grow up sort of feeds into our ultimate life outcome, right?
Yeah.
Things we value. And I mean, I could go into personal details of myself of how the way I was brought up sort of influences the way I live my life that aren't necessarily healthy or might be pretty healthy. And I don't know, just I think it's representative of the way her environment influenced her and the effect it ultimately had on her.
Yeah. I think that thought process, that specific thing that you talked about, even lends itself currently to different Black communities. I know recently one of my family members, and this is like a personal thing, but usually the women over 30 years old, I'm over 30,
Mm-hmm.
I should be getting like annual mammogram because we are prone to cysts in our breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they have led to things. And in my culture, you don't say it because you bring it to life. So I'm just saying things, and y'all know what I mean about things when you got
Mm-hmm.
lumps in your breast. And the other day, I heard a family member tell my grandma, be like, "Hey, I just heard a grandma. Someone just screamed my name, and that kind
You're
of
fine.
got me a little bit discombobulated. But I just heard someone tell my grandma, like, "Oh, I'm going to, just pray about it," and I'm like, and also go to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Like you
Yeah.
can't just be like, I'm gonna pray this way and then it's gonna go away. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, even Granny, the matriarch of our
Mm-hmm.
family, and my grandma was on the phone. And I was like, Granny, wouldn't you also say go see a doctor? And she's like, exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that thought process of thinking like you're just gonna pray away this aggressive disease doesn't make sense
Yeah. I think
to me.
I wouldn't even put the entire blame on any one individual. I think part of it is about how we communicate about science and science-based medicine to the public, right? And like, while I personally don't have an underlying like spiritual belief influencing my scientific way of science, my medicine, the way I approach medicine, I don't think the two are incompatible. I think it's a matter of how we present it right, and we just convince people that maybe things are spiritual in a sense, but that doesn't mean that medicine can't play a role with the two, right? The two can complement one another, and I would like to see that more. I don't know if that came out very well because there's a lot of different things going through my mind when I say that, but yeah. So I guess when we finally got to her death, right? She died of breast cancer, but when she asked for her white daughter, she had just had a stroke and I think a heart attack, and that was when they found out that she had diabetes. So a number of things happening, and she died. I guess post her death, there was some conversation to be had too. She died, right? And I can't remember. I think she died in her sleep. I think she was by herself in a hospital room, and she asked to be buried. I don't remember the name of
Oh
the
my God.
place.
Don't It's where all the other it's where the other white actors and actresses are buried, and then they
Yeah.
denied her, and then she
Hmm.
gave them a second choice, and then they were like, no. I just felt like they didn't
Yeah.
give a shit about what she said.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Some of
I'm
it
sorry.
seemed
That
like
was
they were
just me back.
No, don't apologize. You're here to contribute too. Uh, I mean, it's a valid thing to be angry about. Like it, she knew it wasn't going to happen, but I think it was in the book. Towards the end of the book, Watts points out how her descendants would eventually give her a memorial at that very whatever you call it. So part of me wonders if
Forget
she
what it's called. Yeah.
part of me wonders if she sort of foresaw um, the inevitable progress that has come about,
Right.
as limited as it might
Right.
be, and it's a great full circle to see her finally get the representation she deserved, get to be
Right.
among the other greats, that she is just as great that she is just as equal to in her
Right.
work, if not superior to many. And it's also a great slap in the face to the people who try to stop her. Like, you're going to fail eventually, so fuck you. And it gives some hope. It gives some hope in this very dark world.
Right. Right. Okay.
Well, are there any other thoughts you had, I guess, about her late stage of her life, or just the book in general? Any other notes you wanted to touch on?
I just want to say thank you for putting this book in my atmosphere. I don't think I ever would have picked it up or even known that it exists. And I can't wait to read other nonfictions with you.
Oh, me too. Thank you for so much reading it with me. I thought I have yet to have a live discussion with myself, and I think it's so much easier for me to get the conversation going with someone to help me. Like, I was really nervous when we started, but I think things have flowed really well, and I really appreciate your help in having this conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Everyone who's watching afterwards, hopefully the people watching afterwards will have enjoyed it and got something from it. You should definitely check out the book. There's much more to be said and thought about from the book
so
itself.
Much more to be said. So much more. Yeah.
I'll be sure to link to the book and Jill Watts' other book in the description, which I, for some reason, didn't do that when I set out this live.
Okay.
And of course, it'll be there to watch. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. And I guess I will close it out. Yep. I guess I'll just thank you all for watching. Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.